Hi, welcome back to Celebrating Culture. And now we're in Bourbon Street where the great oysters end up with Dickie Brennan. Dickie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Glad to have you.
You are educating people. Oysters are like wine. They have a different texture where they come from. So you have a map.
I mean, we have these wonderful oyster bars in this city going back 100 years. And when we opened here, it was about trying to educate people a little bit more than just give me a dozen oysters. We know where the oysters are coming from. We know the person who's harvesting. You know, if we have 28 areas that you can harvest in Louisiana waters, area 1 through 8 are actually east of the Mississippi River.
Okay.
Then you have another 20 areas going west. But areas 1 through 8, probably 80% of the production of oysters comes out of those areas. I call that a honey hole.
Exactly.
And you got to wonder, why is it so prolific there? You know, so I mean, it's interesting, it's educational.
Well, it is the fresh water mixing with the salt water of the Gulf, the flow creates the oyster and the texture, and you need that.
You know, and oysters from around the world are different. You get the ones out of the oceans. They're stronger, they have a real briny flavor. Ours is sweet. And that's that combination, it's that brackish salt and fresh water. But it's a balancing act, you know, and you can't have too much of either.
The diversions we're talking about right now, and that can change an oyster area really fast.
With rebuilding our coastline, and part of that is bringing more of the fresh water from the river that has the silt, which will rebuild the marsh. You know, for many years we put levees up, and so we never replenished the marsh. It all went down the river, mouth of the river, and you get to 1,000 feet,
yeah.
so I mean, boom. So this has been a loss. So now we're trying to do diversions through the levees where we can have this river water with the silt, with the, I mean, it's all
We're
good
at Point of
stuff.
La Hache. They got Mardi Gras opening right there.
Right.
When they do those openings, it does change the oyster and the fish as well.
And so, you know, here it's complicated. You know, we need to rebuild the coastline, but at the same time, someone who's farming, all of a sudden, they have to move that bed because there's too much fresh water. It's
but it's
dynamics.
great to see that you know, the dynamics that we got to work together. You know, everybody's got to. You just can't blow a hole in a levee and let it fresh water take over. You've got to plan in advance so that the oyster industry stays, because Louisiana is known for its oysters. I mean, and it's an amazing thing here. So what do we have here?
For years, we've had the traditional on-bottom harvest, and that's where a farmer goes out, creates a reef on the bottom in the mud, and then before you can harvest, it's at least 3 years for that oyster to develop. So it's a long process. Recently, some people have brought in another process, which we call off-bottom harvesting. It's not new, it's been done around the world forever, but hadn't been done traditionally in the Gulf.
LSU's behind this, there's a big facility.
So basically what they do is they use baskets, and instead of creating a reef on the bottom, the oysters, the seeds are put in basket, they run a line, and they're pretty much around 17 inches from the surface.
The tide comes and goes, washes them, stimulates them.
They're cleaner when it comes to, you know, we don't have the sack of oysters with mud and everything, you know, and the flavor profiles are great, you know. And the other thing that I hope is with these diversions, these guys overnight can move the basket, you know, whereas the guy that's doing on bottom, that takes years.
Well, I've been to Caminada Bay, and as they set up in Louisiana, is it spreading now to these other areas are doing the off bottom as well?
More and more are starting to do it. So what happened with us when these guys started pioneering the off bottom, they brought them in, they were expensive. And so a lot of places, you know, nobody wants to break the certain price barrier for a dozen Louisiana oysters, you know, so that's the industry, everybody was scared to me. Then all of a sudden, restaurants started bringing in, some of these younger chefs were bringing in oysters from the East and the West Coast, which, you know, are very expensive. So they would introduce them into the market. And then at that point, you know, I got there with our guys and I said, look, we have these select oysters that are in the same price range. If people are going to bring in East and West Coast, I'd like for us to try introducing our select Gulf oysters. And so we kind of put a category and said, let's call them select, just like an East or West Coast oyster.
Okay.
You know, and it's a different process. And we've had incredible success. You know, I mean, the consumers are very interested in it. They're enjoying it. And our mission's always been to stay local. You're harvesting, you're bringing it to me. I know, you know, I mean, we like that farm to table. So this has enabled us to get into a select category like you see in the East and West Coast. But at the same time, we're staying local.
And you also have dinners where people can come here and have like a pairing.
Oh,
where you can
absolutely.
take them through from the
We've-
beginning.
You know, we've brought oyster farmers in, and I mean, they've participated with the chefs, and throughout the dinner, they tell their story.
There's so much Louisiana seafood. Why do you need to go elsewhere? If you're here in New Orleans, you want to experience local.
We are continuing to work with these individuals because they really are boutique farmers as opposed to a commodity farmer where, you know, they're really going after harvesting a bunch. I'm sitting there with them on the last field trip and I'm like, what's the difference between the one that's flat or the one that has that little pocket?
Sure.
And so there's so many different versions of this variety. And so what we're trying to do is really even pinpoint on, all right, give me these. I want the small one that has the deep little belly, you know, that goes way into the shell.
All right.
See how deep
Yes,
that shell is?
yes, yes.
And then you'll have some that are flat.
This is fabulous. There's a great story about bourbon and Louisiana and Kentucky. So if you
Yeah.
tell us that story.
So, you know, first, I mean, I grew up with a dad. He told all of us, drink bourbon, it's American. And all the Brennan, senior Brennans, they all drank scotch, you know. But he realized at some point in his life, and I think we were doing a lot of farm to table at the restaurant. Paul Prudhomme was the chef at Commander's. It was about working with farmers and local, and he just believed in that. And to the extent it was even with drink bourbon, don't drink scotch. We've taken that road for years. Bourbon, there was a time in New Orleans being the old port city where we weren't getting the brandy or whatever from the old world. So they knew that they were distilling up in Kentucky, so they said send some of the whiskey down here. So they had to put it in wooden kegs. So they had to sanitize it. So they charred the inside of the barrels. They put the White Dog, you know, moonshine
Yes, yes.
is what they were drinking at the time. That went into this charred wood barrel. Then they put it on a barge and it came down the river. It took a while to get down here. When it did hit the city, they sent word back up saying, send more of the red whiskey, which everybody's scratching their head. So
red
what
whiskey?
happened in that shipment was it went into the flavoring process of being in a charred wood cask, and it was aged. You know, it took a while to get down here.
Sure.
So that process is what helped bourbon go from being White Dog, moonshine. Clear, to becoming the aged flavored whiskey that it is today.
Now you have 4 restaurants.
Palace Cafe on Canal Street in the
Oh, it's
old
fabulous
Warline
there.
building, and Dickie Brennan Steakhouse, which is right next to us here at Bourbon House. And our baby is called Tableau.
Okay.
Tableau's on Jackson Square. It's part of the Le Petit Theater.
Yes, I've been there. It's
So-
fabulous. I know the turtle soup is a thing I love that you guys do. And what are some of the other things that you'd recommend somebody coming in?
People ask me all the time, what's your favorite dish? And my response is, it's what's in season. Because what we're doing is we're sourcing the best products you can get in the region. You know, and we have great relationships with farmer, fishermen, you name it. Our menus are going to continually be changing as to what is coming out of the field, what's coming off the boat.
Perfect,
So,
yes.
you know, I'm going to eat a soft shell crab when it's swimming in my back door. I'm not going to eat it when it's been frozen for 4 months.
Right.
So, I mean, I really follow the season, and our restaurants do the same things.
Okay,
And so
great.
anything that's local, we're going to bring it. And our goal is to bring what's the next thing, you know, and so to be able to bring select oysters coming out of our waters instead of coming from the east or the west coast, you know, that's kind of our goal.
Dickie, I want to thank you for being on the show. And stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Celebrating Culture.